It's not often that I get super duper excited about a case. This is the brand new Silverstone RM43324RS. It's a 4U rack mount enclosure with 24 hot swappable drive bays. This to me is peak computer case design, and it is a type of case that I absolutely lost over. So let's take a bit of a closer look at this new case from Silverstone, and I'll let you guys know if this is worth your hard-earned money. Spoiler alert, this case comes in at around about 1,100 US dollars, or around about 1,400 Australian dollars at the time of filming, and you're about to find out why. Let's jump in.
This video is brought to you by VIPSCDKey.com. Have you ever installed Windows 11 only to see the watermark of death? You don't need to fork out a couple of $100s for a key. You can grab one from today's video sponsor, from VIPSCDKey.com for a tenth of the price. You can use our code GEAR to get 30% off for this month only. How good is that? That takes that already cheap Windows 11 key and makes it even cheaper. It's easy as placing your order. Bingo bango. You've got your new key on your orders page. You chuck that key into the activation screen and you're good to go. No more watermark of death. Use code GEAR to get 30% off for this month only. Link in the description. On with the video. Back to you, Nick.
Alrighty, here it is, ladies and gents. The Silverstone RM43324RS, a 24-bay monster. It's got two USB 5GB Type A ports at the front on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side of the enclosure, there's a power button, there's a reset button, there's a power LED, a hard disk activity light, and two network activity lights. There's a service or an asset tag on the front that slides out. This is typically used to label your system when it's in a rack. Let's say you want to know the IP address or the host name, or if your business has an asset number for the system, this is where you would put this so it can be hidden but also very accessible. There's this little latch. This will help you release it from the rack in case you need to slide it out. Here's an example of me pulling it out at Computex. I'm talking about the server, not anything else. Okay, this is a 24-bay server, meaning there's 24 drive bays. What do they look like? Well, to take out a drive sled, press the little red button on each of these sleds. It unclips, and then you can pull it out and then slide it away from the enclosure. These sleds will hold either 3.5-inch spinning RAS drives or 2.5-inch SSDs. If you flip the sled over, you'll see that there's mounting just in case you wanted to screw in the 2.5-inch drive from the bottom. It also includes all the screws with the case as well. On each of the sleds, there's a disk activity light as well as a status light. All right, let's get inside the behemoth. There's 4 screws on the outer edge of the top lid of the enclosure. You want to remove those, and then you'll notice there's 2 buttons. You want to push those down with your thumbs and then slide it in the direction of the arrow. And then you can lift that top panel up and then away from the enclosure, not the case. At the back of the enclosure, there is 2 80mm fan mounts. This is great for exhaust and especially for crossflow with the CPU cooler. There's also 3 120mm fans in these fan sleds. These are 38mm wide. They are much thicker than regular fans. Not sure about the noise levels. We'll test that when we get around to that. And these technically are PWM. However, the connector on the bottom where they plug back in is slightly keyed differently. And this is something that Silverstone does, but you can replace that quite easily, which I've done in the past. These are hot swappable fans as well. And to reinstall is the reverse of removal. And you can see the connector here. It's just PWM. For motherboard support, it will support from ITX up to SSI EEB sized motherboards. This is the only large board I had accessible at the time of filming this section of the video, but as you can see here, it quite comfortably fits in. As well as that, the motherboard tray can be removed from the bottom of the case with 6 screws, just in case you wanted to put the motherboard on the tray and drop it all in one go. This is great for quick and easy removal of motherboards. As for air cooling, you're looking at a maximum supported height of 148mm in total. If you're wanting to install any expansion cards, the maximum length is 345mm. So if for some reason you did want to install a GPU, you could do it. Keep in mind that the maximum width of the card has to fall within 154mm, which means any power connectors will need to be clear of that as well. For power supply support, it will support ATX power supplies You can use mini redundant and dual redundant power supplies here as well, but for the system that we build, we'll be using most likely this 1600 watt power supply, although quite unnecessary. It does include this little bracket here, which will allow you to install an additional fan at the back if you were to be using a redundant power supply, and it would look something like this. It kind of lines up in line with the other two 80mm fan mounts, except this one here is a 60mm fan mount. This is one of the first rack mount enclosures that I've seen that includes rails. That's right, this has a set of 2 rails here. The rails included are toolless rails. Well, at least they're toolless for installing them on the chassis itself. You will need to use some screws that are included with it to mount it into your rack. I would recommend using those screws, otherwise it can slip out, but you can balance it in the rack without them. But yeah, make sure if this is being used for production that you do screw in the screws into the rack. When the enclosure is on rails, yeah, you can see it slides in nice and smooth. And this is another clip from Computex from when I first saw this enclosure. All right, let's talk a little bit about the backplane. This is an interesting one. It's got 12 Molex power connectors. However, the backplane is divided into 6 individual backplanes. And the way this works is it's 6 individual backplanes. So the way I will be powering this when I do our build is using 4 3-way splitters. Make sure you distribute the power over each of the backplanes if you're doing it this way. There is more PWM fan connectors than I can count on the backplane as well. There's just so many, which is excellent just in case you need it, but chances are you probably won't need to use them. For the front panel wiring itself, there's a reset switch. There's 2 network adapter activity light connectors. There's a drive activity light. There's a power switch, as well as the connectors for the power light. And there's the connector for the front panel 5 gigabit USB type A. This backplane uses 6 Mini-SAS HD connectors, also known as SFF 8643 connectors. This is the same as the Mini-SAS connector you're typically used to seeing. However, they basically just split it in half and then stack them on top of each other. Electrically, they are exactly the same. Like I said, they're just stacked on top of each other. As for cables, there's lots of different compatible cables here, and this is just showing you how the Mini-SAS HD connector plugs in and clips into place. It's a very satisfying little click, and the connector itself is quite small. One thing to consider with enclosures like this is, how are you physically going to connect all of your drives? Typically, HBAs will be 16i or 8i wide and not 24i wide. You can get interfaces which will allow you to connect 24 drives. They are prohibitively more expensive than either an 8 drive or a 16 drive interface. You can use something like this. This is a SAS expander, which will allow you to have 1 input and 6 outputs. This is something I'll be using for this build. I will note that this Adaptec SAS expander does not need to use the PCIe Edge connector to work. This is a dumb device. You can just use Molex to power it, and you can take off the rear bracket and place this anywhere in your system. In fact, this Silverstone case has mounting holes for this SAS expander. Typically when we do case videos like this, I'll do a build and I'll test all the thermals and all of that, but the reality of this case, rather than being a whole system, is the hardware that's going in this hasn't arrived yet, and this case is going to be used for another project that is going to be pushed into our production workflow. This is going to be one of our main storage servers that we use here on the channel. Seagate's going to be sending us all the drives to populate this. I've got another board from MSI coming, and also an EPYC 4005 CPU from AMD that's going to live in here. So it's going to be an AM5 server that is just going to be running TrueNAS scale, but in a very, very interesting way. So make sure you subscribe to see that whenever that video comes. Basically now we're just waiting for parts to arrive. So it could be any day now, or any week now, or any month now. Let's hope it doesn't take too long. All right, let's address the elephant in the room first of all, the price. Now, you have to remember when it comes to these cases, these are industrial cases, and the build quality of these are ridiculous. Like, it's insane how solid these things are, and they're designed to be run 24 hours a day for 20 years and without having a hitch. And that's kind of why you spend a bit more money on these type of enclosures. Not only that, it's not just a bare case. You've got an entire backplane. You've got all the power delivery for all the SAS drives. You've got every single fan connector for all the SAS drives. You've got GPIO for drive status indication with an appropriate controller card, all built into this backplane. So it's not just a JBOD backplane, it can be used in a different type of setup as well. Now, one thing that I will say that is improved from a lot of other Silverstone cases that I have used in the past is the fan sleds. Now, these fan sleds with the quality are much better than they've ever been. They used to use this other type of plastic that used to degrade over time, and you could tell it was going to do it from the jump. Not only that, the worst part of it was not the enclosures themselves for the fans, but rather the sleds that held the removable fans into place. They used to use that semi-transparent clear plastic, and over heaps of heat cycles through a system, they would get flaky, they'd start to crack, and they'd break apart. But they're using a much softer plastic here, which looks as though it won't be prone to cracking like that, which is a big deal for me, especially if I decide to change out these fans. The backplane that Silverstone went with is a little bit of an interesting one because technically it's not a single backplane, it's 6 individual backplanes, and that brings a few challenges with it. First of all, because it's 6 individual backplanes, it requires its own power for each of those individual backplanes, and it requires dual Molex for each of those backplanes. Now, because of the drive density in this enclosure, the backplane uses a different SAS connector to what other Silverstone cases have used in the past. So typically they'd use the 8087 connector, but this one uses the 8643 connector, which is electrically identical to the other SAS connector. Basically, they cut it in half and then they stack them on top of each other and gives you a mini SAS HD connector rather than just a regular mini SAS connector. I know this isn't our typical case review format. It's a bit difficult to review a case in a way that you might think if we're not building in it, but as far as what I can tell already with test fitting hardware and everything, this will do exactly what you think it's going to do. It's not designed to have big GPUs in it, but you can do it. It's not designed to have a liquid cooler in it, but technically you could do it if you want. This is designed to be a utilitarian rack mount enclosure, which is why one of the best features of this case is something that you may overlook, and that is it includes rack rails. Rack rails to me are some of the most important things when it comes to rack mount cases. Let me explain why this is important to me. Those 2 Almador cases that we reviewed last year and we did builds in and we did a whole bunch of videos with are great rack mount cases. However, the rail solution for those 2 cases do not exist. I couldn't find any server rails that would allow me to rack mount them. So I had to get some generic rails that weren't telescopic rails that I'm typically used to using on servers, and they're just kind of crap. They kind of just sit in the rack and whatever, like it's fine, right? Silverstone figured out a way to include the server rack rails in the pricing and not push the price up too much, which is something that I think is an absolute must with rack mount cases. Every single rack mount case, doesn't matter what you're using it for, doesn't matter what the application is, should include rack mount rails. And there's got to be a way to make the price inclusive with those rails, right? And I think that's what's really good about this case, right? I'll say it again. Rack mount rails need to be included with rack mount cases. It just doesn't make sense that almost every other rack mount case that we've ever covered on the channel, well, actually, every single rack mount case that we've ever covered on the channel has not included rails. Every single set of rails that I've had for every rack mount enclosure that we've ever showed, I've had to purchase separately, right? So yeah, it's good that they're included with this one. I guess you just don't know how important rack rails are until you really need them. And I need them for every one of these cases because They don't sit in a cupboard or whatever. They go in a rack. You'll see the new rack that I've built in the video when we deploy this, because it's very cool, it's very small, and it's portable. And it's cheap, actually, that's the main thing. Everyone buys those StarTech racks, and they're expensive. The rack that I've got costs a quarter of the price. You'll see. Look, I know this is a very expensive enclosure and it's not for everyone, but the whole point of this project and me showing this to you is it's something that I'm super passionate about, and there's going to be someone who's going to find the information in this video useful. A lot of enthusiasts who do have home lab setups will possibly look at investing this much money in a case for their storage server, especially because, well, in our region at least, enclosures like the massive ones from 45 drives are just not accessible here in Australia. We just can't get them. And Silverstone kind of owns this part of the market when it comes to creating enclosures for everyone. I spoke to Silverstone about why they make rack mount enclosures, and basically their answer was there's all of the big players, and actually I spoke about this in our Computex coverage as well, but there's a whole bunch of really massive players in the server space who own everything, and then you're locked into a certain ecosystem, and then there's nothing in between where you can build your own, or it's just regular off-the-shelf consumer grade gear. This is that perfect middle ground if you're serious about having your own server setups, and if you want to use your own hardware or some commodity grade off-the-shelf hardware to build some servers, to do things, to do real things. And that's kind of why I like these cases from Silverstone. Yeah, they're expensive and they're not for everyone, but I'm glad they exist because there are enthusiasts like me out there who want to use this kind of stuff, right? And there's a lot of you guys out there too, because you guys tell me about this stuff all the time, and it is interesting that a lot of you are looking at doing similar things like this. Look, I'm waffling on a bit, but the reason why I need this isn't just like some YouTuber project. This is a need at the moment. We need more storage. We are running out of storage at a rapid pace every single day, and this is going to help us push the channel forward. And that's why I'm very, very excited about this. But this isn't the only new rack mount system that we're going to be building or putting together or deploying. So make sure you subscribe to see that, because this, my friends, is one of the many cool new things that we're going to be doing on the channel.